Hi, I'm Becky Brune, and welcome to my vlog. Sense and Sensibility has not been one of my favorite Jane Austen novels, but since watching the recent PBS series, Miss Austen, and if you haven't seen that yet, you are in for a big treat. It's a very different take on Jane Austen from the usual. She's not beautiful, she's not starry-eyed, she is wiry and pale and astute, beautifully acted by Patsy Farron. And it feels to me like the truth. And it sent me back to the novel to try to figure out why I didn't like it, because I do remember liking the adaptations. Sense and Sensibility is, of course, Elinor and Marianne Dashwood's story, but it's also a depiction of the patriarchy. Men rule by right, by law, and by duty. And family wealth and position are passed down through the eldest son. Elinor and Marianne, like most women at the time, had to ally themselves with a man. Their window of opportunity is brief. And despite this being vital for their survival, they can only pursue it passively, get access to a single man, evaluate his character, inspire him to make a proposal, and then someone needs to set the hook and close the deal for them. In this novel, men betray women, they are idle and rude, they openly discuss the value of a woman based on her beauty, they toy with a woman's affections even though they are already engaged. Even Colonel Brandon is given Marianne as a consolation prize for his suffering, and yet they are still considered respectable men. And I don't like it, but I do like the adaptations. So I went back to them too, to see how they can present this catch a man season of life inside the harshness of a patriarchy and still let modern us into the story and the characters. The 2008 BBC series and the 1995 Lee and Emma Thompson movie are both strong adaptations, and they make significant alterations to the book. Of all Jane Austen's characters, the one with the least access to eligible men is Emma. She just had the one. I'm not going to count Mr. Elton, but a close second behind her is the Dashwood sisters. Their uncle leaves them very little. Their older brother, the eldest son, inherits everything and doesn't give them anything, even though he has promised he would. So the sisters, who are teenagers, have to go with their mom and live in a remote cottage in the country. Access to men is extremely limited there. Elinor has already met and fallen in love with Edward by the time they leave the estate. But once they move out, he is off limits. Edward is an eldest son, and his family wants him to be a great man, and Elinor cannot help with that. At the cottage, Sir John Middleton does offer to have dances and parties, but there doesn't really seem to be that many young eligible men. So Marianne has really no prospects until Willoughby falls down her chimney. Both adaptations stick pretty close to the book about the brother not giving them money. And as with the book, it's very funny and also very brutal.
I thought of giving the girls £1,000 apiece. Would that be fair, do you think?
1,000 apiece? Are you mad? Do you rob your only child of his rightful inheritance?
£1,500 then. What do you say to 1,500?
What brother on earth would do half so much for his real sisters, let alone half-blood?
Both adaptations also choose very remote cottages, more remote than the book, actually. Women living there alone in that wild country starts to feel like the beginning of a slasher movie, which is actually helpful to the story because it is dangerous. Empty countryside, no dad, no brother. This version emphasizes the danger to our sisters by giving us something that we never see in a Jane Austen novel, which is a sex scene. An anonymous man seduces a girl.
Do you truly love me?
Trust me.
And then leaves her, rides off on his horse. It foreshadows the story that a naive, unprotected woman is vulnerable to predatory men who will ruin her chances of finding a safe alliance. And it lets us know that there are bad men out there. Yeah. And that scene is true to the book. That is the inciting incident for Marianne's story. And another moment that I really enjoy from this version takes that slasher motif a little further. When Willoughby appears to Colonel Brandon, it's almost like a jump scare. Very good use of a modern trope for a Jane Austen story. The 1995 adaptation goes in a different direction. Rather than focusing on the danger, it shifts the power dynamic slightly to the women by casting Emma Thompson as Eleanor. And I do realize she was the screenwriter and she was going to get cast, and she is an excellent actress. But it is impossible to see Emma Thompson as a vulnerable teenager, so they age the character.
But I feel for Marianne. She will lose her bloom and end a spinster like Eleanor.
Eleanor is 19 years old. In no stretch is she a spinster. So in this adaptation, she has more dignity, more wisdom. She addresses the staff of the estate as the mistress of the house. She takes the lead on finding a new place for them to live. She's more modern.
Imagine how that is compounded when one has no hope and no choice of any occupation whatsoever. That you will inherit your fortune. We cannot even earn ours.
So all of the youthful vulnerability is put onto Marianne.
She would not let me in.
And we get an Eleanor who is easier for us to identify with. Both of the lovers in Sense and Sensibility are ineligible. Willoughby has to marry for money, and he knows he does. And Edward is engaged to Lucy Steele and has been for 4 or 5 years. But they both dilly-dally openly with our sisters. Why are the girls not warned? Well, because there's a lack of reliable information. Edward hasn't told anybody about his engagement. So while Eleanor is falling in love with him, he's the only one who can tell her, and he doesn't. And Willoughby, well, everyone says he's a great guy, but they don't actually know him. And Middleton, who is the father figure stand-in, says he's as great a man as ever lived. But that's because he's a great shot and he has an excellent dog. And in the absence of information, Marianne and Eleanor have to trust themselves. They have to use their own judgment. And when you're hot for somebody, that is a big no-no. So both girls are duped. We have to forgive Edward, and we are expected to sympathize with Willoughby, which is pretty hard to do, actually. So how do the adaptations get us there? The 1995 version does it with some great casting. They put non-threatening, likable male actors into almost all of the male roles, and that softens them. Best of all, Hugh Grant as Edward. This Edward is Hugh Grant. He can't help it that he falls in love with Eleanor and misleads her while he's engaged to someone else. And in this version, he does try to tell Eleanor that he's engaged.
Eleanor, I want to speak to you.
And he's interrupted. So we are inclined to overlook this minor flaw. Willoughby, we are told, was planning to propose to Marianne even though it would ruin him financially. He didn't do it, but he planned to. And then later, during Marianne's wedding, we see him up on a hill alone on his horse, looking very handsome and miserable. He is punished, and we have some sympathy. The 2008 version does the same thing with Edward. They cast Dan Stevens from Downton Abbey as Hugh Grant. I'm just kidding, as Edward. But he doesn't try to confess his engagement. And this Eleanor is way more vulnerable and wide-eyed than Emma Thompson's. More upbeat and positive. She has a sense of humor and an openness to the world.
Can we really settle here, do you think? Of course we can.
That is appropriate for her age and closer to the book. We forgive Edward because Eleanor does. Willoughby is a really bad man. He was the seducer at the opening. So the 2008 version doesn't ask us to sympathize with him. Instead, they soften Marianne's fall by giving hints of a slight connection between her and Colonel Brandon before Willoughby shows up. So Brandon is an option for Marianne. She's not being passed off as a consolation prize. And it makes the ending more palatable. And I'm going to point out here that Jane Austen did none of this softening. She didn't have to. In her world, in Eleanor and Marianne's world, those were the rules. Neither Eleanor nor Marianne inspires a marriage proposal. Eleanor locks down, she doesn't tell anybody, and she suffers silently while she watches Edward stay true to his worthless fiancé, and she admires him for his honor. Marianne wallows in her own grief, runs around in the rain, gets very sick, and almost dies. People who analyze Sense and Sensibility call out that difference between the sisters as the central theme. Self-discipline versus unchecked emotion. And that may be true, but it doesn't allow a lot of room for a sympathetic sister relationship. They are extremes and they don't have a mutual sympathy. I think we are meant to admire Eleanor for her stoicism, but honestly, I admire Marianne for the same reason that Willoughby and Colonel Brandon do. She is an open and eager and emotional 17-year-old. Eleanor, to me, feels seriously repressed. So again, I was curious to see how the adaptations would present that high contrast, fairly unsympathetic sister relationship. The 2008 version did present Eleanor as practical, self-disciplined, and private. At one point, she actually walks into a cave. But the actress has a facial vulnerability that allows us to see her falling in love with Edward. We see her pain and confusion as he disappoints her. She even displays frustration at one point. And they let those things coexist with her upbeat nature. It makes her very human. And Marianne, who in the book is fairly dogmatic and rigid, no second loves, you have to see the world the way I do. In the 2008 version, she comes off as more naive.
I think it's best not to hope too fervently for something that may never happen.
Then let me hope for you.
And when she runs out into the rain, she is joyful. She has an almost spiritual expression on her face. And they are sympathetic to each other.
What strange creatures men are.
Yes, indeed.
Perhaps they see us not as people, but as playthings, Helena.
Do I need to tell you that those lines were not in the book? In the 1995 version, their relationship is quite different because of their age difference. Eleanor has a lot on her plate. They emphasize the poverty, and she's responsible for not letting her mom spend too much money.
Do you want us to starve?
No, just not to eat beef.
So she doesn't have a lot of joy or hopefulness.
Why did you not urge him to stay?
He must have had his reasons for going.
His reason was no doubt your coldness.
Are you asleep?
With you in the room.
She comes off as more sad than stoic, in my opinion. And Marianne behaves like a suburban teenager, racing around town, screaming. People who only see this adaptation sometimes compare her to Lydia Bennet, but I think that's wrong. Marianne is an artist, a musician, a serious reader, and a romantic with a capital R. However, when Marianne is near death, we do see how much Eleanor loves her, how much she needs her, and it exposes a depth to their relationship. It's very touching. In the novel, Eleanor and Marianne have no male to protect them. No one to step forward to ask about intentions, nobody to horsewhip Willoughby or to slap Edward. Their closest male relative is their brother who didn't give them any money. Their mother is not protective. Eleanor tries to get her mom to ask Marianne about her relationship with Willoughby. Are they engaged? And the mom won't do it. She won't even ask, and she won't let Eleanor either. So Marianne is publicly humiliated and almost loses her life and ends up married to Colonel Brandon, and Eleanor just gets lucky. Edward would have married Lucy Steele if he had not been saved inadvertently by his selfish mother, although Edward and Eleanor will be relatively poor. The 2008 version has a great quote from the mom.
If I was still mistress of Norland, my girls would never be treated like this.
Truth spoken. And Colonel Brandon does challenge Willoughby and asks what his intentions are toward Marianne.
And what right have you to ask me?
If he hadn't been Willoughby's rival, he could have gotten away with that. Later, when Colonel Brandon has a duel with Willoughby, it kind of looks like it's about Marianne, but it's not. It's about the young girl who gets seduced in the beginning by Willoughby. And Margaret has a great line.
I wish I was a man. Girls can never do anything. Men can ride about the country and do things. And girls just sit and wait for things to happen.
And in this version, very different from the novel, Eleanor does not immediately celebrate Marianne's engagement to Colonel Brandon.
Colonel Brandon is an excellent man, and we owe him a great deal. But you should not marry him out of gratitude.
The 1995 version lets us see Marianne fall in love with Colonel Brandon, or maybe she's just giving into
You will
it.
not stay away long.
It's a little ick. But there is a hilarious scene between Lucy Steele and Fanny Dashwood. Lucy's sister is cut from this version, so Lucy herself has to reveal the engagement to Fanny. And it is super satisfying to see the facade crumble. Because it's the kind of scene Jane Austen would only tell us secondhand. I think of all of the changes that I've described in both adaptations as little bits of flavor and spice that the adapters have added to try to make the story more palatable. And I think that it has been successful. Jane Austen never really cares much about weddings. Instead, she usually gives us a little glimpse into the future. And she describes Marianne and Eleanor as having very happy lives. But in this novel, she gives us something a little bit more. Basically, she says that in a world where the cards are so stacked against women, Lucy Steele is the real winner because Lucy was willing to pursue self-interest at any cost. I know she's being facetious. Actually, I don't know why she says that, but it's just true enough to be uncomfortable. So I'm glad that both these adaptations left that out. As I was researching for this video, a new adaptation of Sense and Sensibilities was announced. And Netflix has already announced a new Pride and Prejudice series with Olivia Colman in it, I assume as Mrs. Bennet. So I don't know about you, but I kind of can't wait. Thanks for being here. See you next time. Bye.